Hello, this is Barbara, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the May 5th issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Strikes in the UAE, Oman, and at sea strain Iran truce to the breaking point. The drone missile attacks were the first of their kind since the U.S. Iranian ceasefire began last month. They coincided with reported clashes between American and Iranian vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. News analysis. China seeks an advantage with both Trump and Iran as war evolves. With President Trump's visit to Beijing looming, China is pushing to negotiate even as its companies export material that could be used by Iran's military. As President Trump tries to sort out his next steps on the Iran war, China is taking its own actions to ensure that it benefits from whatever outcome eventually emerges. China is prodding Iranian officials to negotiate with the United States while also quietly allowing its companies to give Iran commercial support that could help Iran's military if Mr. Trump dives back into a full-blown war. The Chinese government has not taken a strong position on the war. It has multiple goals and acts with caution, so it is hedging, officials and analysts say. The war will no doubt be an important issue in talks between Mr. Trump and Xi Jinping, China's leader, when they meet in Beijing for a 2-day summit scheduled to start May 14th. On the one hand, having the United States bogged down in yet another war in the Middle East is advantageous to China. The U.S. military has quickly expended an enormous amount of munitions, depleting stockpiles that would be critical in any future conflict with China. And the war diverts the Trump administration's attention from Asia. But China also sees a benefit to trying to help end the war, which Mr. Trump and Israel started more than 2 months ago. Early in the war, Iran's military effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz to most ships while allowing vessels carrying Iranian oil to cross, including ones bound for China. But the Chinese economy has still been hurt by surging global energy prices, and the country is also feeling an impact from a U.S. naval blockade that prevents some ships from leaving Iran's ports. Although some observe that Beijing might favor a prolonged war in Iran, the policy discourse in Beijing in fact favors de-escalation, said Yun Sun, a scholar of China at the Stimson Center, a foreign affairs research group in Washington. Both China and Russia have asked Iran to continue negotiations with the Americans, said 2 Iranian officials. Last Wednesday, Mr. Trump spoke to President Vladimir Putin of Russia about the war, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Wang Yi, his Chinese counterpart, discussed the war in a call on Thursday, said Liu Pengyu, a Chinese embassy spokesman in Washington. Mr. Trump already postponed the summit with Mr. Xi once because of the war. He wants to go to Beijing in a position of strength, officials say, and not with an unresolved conflict that continues to roil global markets and sap U.S. military resources. For China, there's the issue of our blockade, said Rush Doshi, a scholar at Georgetown University and the Council on Foreign Relations, who worked on China policy in the Biden White House. For us, there's the issue of China's support of Iran. American intelligence agencies have information that a Chinese company may have tried to send a shipment of shoulder-fired missiles to Iran. Chinese companies have also shipped Iran material that is considered dual use, meaning it can serve civilian or military purposes, American officials say. And after the U.S. blockade started last month, Marines found materials on an Iranian-flagged ship that Mr. Trump said was not very nice and perhaps a gift from China. I was a little surprised, but because I have a very good relationship and I thought I had an understanding with President Xi, he told CNBC on April 21st. But that's all right. That's the way war goes, right? That came a week after Mr. Trump told Fox News that he had written a letter to Mr. Xi asking him not to send weapons to Iran. He said Mr. Xi wrote him a letter back saying that essentially he's not doing that. Mr. Trump's apparent nonchalance was another sign of his drive to keep his summit with Mr. Xi on track. Months ago, Mr. Trump and top aides had intended to focus on tariffs and a potential trade agreement in talks with Mr. Xi, but now discussions over the Iran war could overshadow that. Officials in Beijing are holding off serious pressure on Iran until there is a direct ask from President Trump, said Ms. Young, who conducted interviews in the Chinese capital recently. Because officials want to amplify positive relations with the U.S., they might take seriously any ask that Mr. Trump makes of China on Iran. Mr. Liu, the spokesman for the Chinese embassy, said in a statement that keeping the area safe and stable and ensuring unimpeded passage serves the common interest of the international community. He criticizes the U.S. naval blockade as a dangerous and irresponsible move. He did not mention the Iranian military's attack on ships that Iran had not granted safe passage. Mr. Liu added that the pressing priority is to prevent by all means a relapse in fighting. Mr. Liu pointed to Wang Yi, China's top diplomat, having had 26 phone calls with officials in Iran, Israel, and Russia, the Gulf Arab nations, and other countries before the United States and Iran reached a fragile ceasefire early in April. Two of the calls were with Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, he added. China's special envoy for the Middle East also traveled to the region. China played a crucial role behind the scenes in getting Iran to accept the terms of the ceasefire, several foreign officials said, adding that diplomats from some of the countries involved in the conflict are encouraging China to stay engaged. Like other officials interviewed for this article, they spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe sensitive diplomacy. As for Chinese shipments to Iran, Mr. Liu said that we handle the export of military products prudently and responsibly and strictly control the export of dual-use articles. In Iran, officials in the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, or IRGC, are talking about the possibility of growing their ties to China after the war, to get the type of military aid that Chinese officials have given Pakistan over the years, said Ali Vaez, the director of the Iran project at the International Crisis Group. I see more and more voices affiliated with the IRGC, now the real power in Iran, openly saying that the failure of Iran has been that it was too shy about aligning itself with China and Russia and was instead trying to preserve its independence, he said. They say they need to mortgage out part of the country to China to end up where Pakistan is. Across the Persian Gulf, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are trying to get China to play a bigger diplomatic role. On April 20th, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia called Mr. Xi to talk about the war. During the war, Saudi Arabia asked China to press Iran to refrain from attacking the kingdom, a Saudi official said. In 2023, China helped finalize a diplomatic opening between Iran and Saudi Arabia after those countries had talked about further engagement for years. China is seen in Riyadh as a vested party in relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the Saudi official said. Pakistan, which has hosted one round of U.S.-Iran peace talks, is also relying on China to help push negotiations forward. On March 31st, China and Pakistan issued a 5-point statement calling for an immediate ceasefire, peace talks, the protection of civilian sites, an opening in the Strait of Hormuz, and respect for the United Nations Charter. On April 8th, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan thanked 5 countries in a social media post for their help in sealing the ceasefire deal. China was at the top of the list. China gave a public show of support for Iran that same week by joining Russia in vetoing a UN resolution that would have allowed for multinational military action to force Iran to open the strait. Behind the scenes, China told Iran it should show flexibility and agree to a ceasefire, Iranian officials said. However, some analysts argue China's appetite for expanding its diplomatic role in the Middle East is probably limited. Beijing's priorities are more practical, said Ryan Haas, a former career diplomat and White House national security official now at the Brookings Institute. They want reliable access to energy inputs and secure markets for their exports. They do not want to accept another region's security challenges as their own problems. Strikes in the UAE, Oman, and at sea strain Iran truce to the breaking point. Violence flared anew in and around the Persian Gulf on Monday as the United Arab Emirates said Iran had fired missiles and drones at its territory, and the U.S. military said it sank several Iranian military boats, straining the fragile ceasefire in the Middle East. The Emirati authorities blamed Iran for attacks on a major oil port and an oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz, injuring 3 people in the first such attacks in the UAE since the truce began 4 weeks ago. Oman also reported an attack that injured 2 people in the coastal town of Buqa, near Emirati territory, without identifying the perpetrator. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Loud booms shook the Emirati city of Dubai as air defense missiles detonated high overhead. U.S. Central Command said it had shot down Iranian missiles and drones aimed at U.S. military and commercial ships around the strait. It was not clear if the attacks signaled the collapse of the strained truce and a resumption of active warfare. Iran did not officially confirm or deny that it had resumed attacks, but a senior military official denied on state media that its boats had been sunk. Iran has frequently targeted energy infrastructure in Gulf countries that host American military bases since Israel and the United States attacked in late February, beginning the war. But those attacks on Iran's Gulf neighbors more or less came to a halt when a ceasefire went into effect on April 8th. At least 3 Indian citizens were injured when an Iranian drone struck an oil industrial zone in Fujairah, an Emirati port in the southern end of the Strait of Hormuz, the local authorities said. Oman, without assigning blame, said a residential building near the strait had been struck and 2 people injured. No casualties were reported in the attack on an Emirati oil tanker. South Korean's government confirmed an explosion and fire in the same area on a ship belonging to a South Korean company, but did not say it had been attacked. Negotiations between Iran and the United States, mediated by Pakistan, on a comprehensive deal to end the war have stalled as both sides have drawn seemingly incompatible red lines. The Trump administration had sought to pressure Iran to end its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf with a new military operation to help commercial ships stuck in the waterway to leave. Central Command said on Monday that several U.S. vessels had steamed through the strait and that they had accompanied a few commercial ships. Iranian officials threatened to retaliate against American warships or other vessels that sought to run the blockade. Iran's grip on the Strait of Hormuz, a vital route for oil and gas, has rattled markets and sent energy prices skyrocketing worldwide. In response, the United States has imposed its own blockade of Iranian ports. President Trump had initially conditioned the ceasefire with Iran on the end of the Iranian blockade. But Iran has effectively prevented most traffic from traveling through the waterway, and Tehran continues to assert that it has the right to control which ships can pass and also to assess tolls on them. White House considers vetting AI models before they are released. The Trump administration, which took a non-interventionist approach to artificial intelligence, is now discussing imposing oversight on AI models before they are made publicly available. President Trump, who promoted a hands-off approach to artificial intelligence and gave Silicon Valley free rein to roll out the technology, is considering the introduction of government oversight over new AI models, according to U.S. officials and people briefed on the deliberations. The administration is discussing an executive order to create an AI working group that would bring together tech executives and government officials to examine potential oversight procedures, according to U.S. officials who decided who declined to be identified in order to discuss deliberations over sensitive policies. Among the potential plans is a formal government review process for new AI models. In meetings last week, White House officials told executives from Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI about some of those plans. People briefed on the conversation said. The working group is likely to consider a number of oversight approaches, officials said, but a review process could be similar to one being developed in Britain, which has assigned several government bodies to ensure that AI models meet certain safety standards, people in the tech industry and the administration said. The discussions signal a stark reversal in the Trump administration's approach to AI. Since returning to office last year, Mr. Trump has been a major booster of the technology, which he said is vital to winning the geopolitical contest against China. Among other moves, he swiftly rolled back a Biden administration regulatory process that asked AI developers to perform safety evaluations and report on AI models with potential military applications. We're going to make this industry absolutely the top, because right now it's a beautiful baby that's born, Mr. Trump said of AI at an event in July. We have to grow that baby and let that baby thrive. We can't stop it. We can't stop it with politics. We can't stop it with foolish rules and even stupid rules. Mr. Trump left room for some rules, but he added that they have to be more brilliant than even the technology itself. But Mr. Trump has increasingly found himself isolated on the issue of AI as public concerns mount about the threat that the technology poses to jobs, energy prices, education, privacy, and mental health. Democrats and Republicans have found common ground on the topic. A Pew Research Center poll last year found that 50% of Republicans and 51% of Democrats said they were more concerned than excited about the increased use of AI in daily life. The non-interventionist policy also began changing last month after the startup Anthropic announced a new AI model called Mythos. Mythos is so powerful at identifying security vulnerabilities in software that it could lead to a cybersecurity reckoning, said Anthropic, which declined to release the model to the public. The White House wants to avoid any political repercussions if a devastating AI-enabled cyber attack were to occur, people in the tech industry and the administration said. The administration is also evaluating whether new AI models could yield cyber capabilities that could be useful to the Pentagon and U.S. intelligence agencies, they said. To get ahead of models like Mythos, some officials are pushing for a review system that would give the government first access to AI models, but that would not block their release, people briefed on the talks said. The shift on AI has sowed confusion. As conversations between the White House and tech companies continue, some executives have argued that too much government oversight will slow down U.S. innovation against China, the people briefed on the discussion said. But the companies also do not agree on how the United States should move forward with potential regulation. The technology is moving extremely fast, and there are few formal procedures, but they also don't want to over-regulate, said Dean Ball, who was a senior advisor on AI in the Trump administration before leaving last year for the Foundation for American Innovation. It's a tricky balance. A White House official said that discussions on any potential executive order were speculation and that Mr. Trump would make any policy announcement himself. The changing of policy on AI coincides with a leadership change at the White House. In March, David Sachs, the White House AI czar, who had spearheaded the administration's deregulation efforts, said he was leaving the role. Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent have stepped in to fill Mr. Sachs' position. Some of the people said Ms. Wiles and Mr. Bessent have told people outside the administration that they plan to have a bigger hand in shaping AI policy. But Ms. Wiles and Mr. Bessent's plans have been complicated by a bitter dispute between the Pentagon and Anthropic. This year, the startup and the Pentagon became embroiled in a fight over a $200 million contract and how the military should use AI in warfare. When the two sides failed to agree on terms, the Pentagon cut off the government's use of Anthropic's technology in March. Anthropic has since sued the government. The conflict has made it difficult for some government agencies, which had come to rely on Anthropic's technology, according to military intelligence and other U.S. officials. Anthropic's AI is still being used by the military in a system known as Maven, which helps analyze intelligence and suggests targets for airstrikes in the war in Iran. The National Security Agency has also recently used Anthropic's Mythos model to assess vulnerabilities in the U.S. government's software, people with knowledge of the work said. Last month, Ms. Wiles and Mr. Bessent held a meeting at the White House with Dario Amodei, Anthropic's chief executive, with a focus on getting the company's technology back in use by the government. Both sides later described the meeting as productive. Officials said that if the administration moved ahead with vetting AI models, the working group would help determine the agencies that would help with the effort. With no federal agency responsible for all government cybersecurity work, some officials said having the NSA, the White House Office of the National Cyber Director, and the Director of National Intelligence oversee the model review was the best way to proceed. The working group could also look at whether there is a role for the Center for AI Standards and Innovation, an agency the Biden administration established to vet AI models that are voluntarily shared with the government. Under Mr. Trump, the organization has been sidelined, people in the industry said, even though the White House said in an AI policy paper that the group should play a role in assessing the performance and reliability of AI systems. Any of these moves would take the administration far from a philosophy on regulation that Vice President J.D. Vance outlined in a speech at an international AI gathering in Paris last year. At the time, he warned industry and government officials that excessive regulation of the AI sector could kill a transformative industry just as it's taking off. The AI future is not going to be won by hand-wringing about safety, he said. It will be won by building. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Fear and vigilance are now constant companions for many American Jews. Each new attack, like the London stabbings last week, brings a heightened sense of caution to an already wary population. Lindsay Liss made a sobering request of her 17-year-old daughter when she sent her on a trip to Europe last summer. Don't wear a Star of David necklace charm. There's no reason to make yourself a target, said Ms. Liss, a 51-year-old artist and mother of 4 who lives in Chicago and grew up outside Detroit, near where an armed man rammed his truck into a synagogue in March. Diane Rosenthal, 64, who lost 2 brothers in the 2018 shooting rampage at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, said she thinks twice about going to crowded events. I look for the exit doors, she said, which is not a normal sense of what people should be doing for a joyful occasion like a graduation. Rabbi Shimon Dudai of the congregation B'nai Zion in Key West, Florida, said that since the Hamas-led attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023, he delivers services with a 9mm pistol within arm's reach. I don't want to come to a holy space like this, a sanctuary, holding a gun, said Rabbi Dudai, 84, who keeps the pistol in a traditional Jewish lectern used to prop up religious texts. I just don't want to take the risk of my people getting hurt if I'm capable of using a gun properly and capable of defending them to the best of my ability. From tempering overt displays of their faith to being hyper-alert to issuing warnings to fellow congregants, many American Jews say they have changed their behavior in response to increased anti-Semitic violence in recent years, especially since the October 7th attacks. Jews have faced anti-Semitism throughout history, but the past few years have made many feel like it has become normalized and accepted, Ms. Rosenthal said. Every time a new crime occurs, such as the knife attack last week against 2 Jewish men in London, an episode the police declared a terroristic incident, Jewish leaders and everyday Jews say that ever-present vigilance becomes heightened anew. There is a constant level of concern that something will pop off, says Joseph Landsberg, 35, the security director for the Boca Raton Synagogue in Florida, whose team planned additional security measures this weekend after the London attack. It's not a matter of if, but when. A survey by the American Jewish Committee, a nonprofit, found this year that more than half of American Jews said they had changed their behavior out of fear after high-profile attacks in 2025, including the arson attack at the home of Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania and the killing of 2 Israeli embassy aides outside a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C. Leah C. Heibel, a professor of human development and family studies at the University of California, Davis, found in a study published last year that fears about anti-Semitism and hateful rhetoric had translated into behavioral changes and increased symptoms of depression and anxiety among California Jews. While she has not tracked those feelings daily since, she said in an email on Saturday that she would hypothesize that acute fear spikes follow in response to violent attacks, leaving Jews with residually higher baseline anxiety than before. We certainly are not at the point where it is returning to pre-October 7th levels, Dr. Hebel said, adding that the response is both to violent attacks and cumulative daily experiences. The most obvious changes have come at synagogues like the one in Boca Raton. After the stabbings on Wednesday in London's Golders Green neighborhood, Mr. Landsberg, originally a Londoner himself, said that his team held an operational meeting and contacted other synagogues in the area, now a common practice. Mark Hanfling, chief of security at a synagogue in Edison, New Jersey, said that after attacks like the one in London, his team sends congregants a WhatsApp message warning them to be extra vigilant while walking near the synagogue and outside their homes. Mr. Hanfling asked that his synagogue not be named for fear that it might be attacked. Over the last 4 years, he said, his team has added armed guards inside and outside the synagogue. Volunteers screen congregants as they enter. The synagogue also installed bulletproof windows and security cameras. Mr. Hanfling, who is 73 and the son of Holocaust survivors, said he was disheartened to see rising anti-Semitic sentiment around the world. We appreciate that we live in a free country, he said, but things can turn. Fear has also reshaped Jewish life in ways that may be less apparent, but no less significant. Miss Liz, the Chicago artist, said her family had taken certain universities off the list for her children because of concerns about anti-Semitism. Things have gone completely backwards, she said. Mayor Mark J. Schwartz of Teaneck, New Jersey, who was an Orthodox Jew, said he used to wear his yarmulke everywhere and judge people who didn't. But on a recent trip with his wife to Paris, she warned him not to wear it. At one point, he forgot and felt like I had a heart attack. You're starting to feel that, not just in Paris, but everywhere, said Mr. Schwartz, 50. I'm embarrassed that I have a baseball hat here in my jacket, just in case. It's a shame. Bishay Barhani withstood several years of phone calls harassing her and her employees at Tzion Cafe, a kosher Ethiopian Israeli restaurant in Harlem. Once, in August 2023, a person painted a yellow swastika on her front door. Late last year, she said, she began to receive persistent death threats. So in February, after 14 years of welcoming passers-by into her cafe, Miss Baharni, 50, closed her doors save for private events, including a weekly Shabbat dinner. During the dinners, Ms. Barhani said she keeps the doors locked for peace of mind. People always ask me, are you going to have security, she said. To be honest, no. I think we are in a country that should feel safe enough that I don't need to look behind my back every time. Carol Zawatsky, the chief executive of the Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, describes the financial and mental toll as a Jewish tax. To go worship, you're going to go through a magnetometer. You're going to greet the security guards for Sabbath. On the way in, Shabbat Shalom, she said. I think that has an impact on the psyche of young Jews who grow up with this as a constant in their lives. The Tree of Life has a traveling exhibition that, among other things, explores the history of anti Semitism in America as the country approaches its 250th anniversary. It is part of many efforts since the 2018 shooting to promote interfaith dialogue and education about religious tolerance. I would never concede that we have to accept hatred forever, she said, for anyone. Clear waters, murky morals. When humans swim with killer whales. Only 2 places in the world allow tourists to enter the water with the ocean's apex predator, but the safety of both species is a growing concern. The turquoise waters off La Ventana, a sleepy coastal town on Mexico's Baja Peninsula, Claudio Rios, 41, monitored the radio of a fishing boat. It was late March. His eyes scanned the horizon, one hand loose on the wheel as the Sea of Cortez swayed beneath him. It smells like orcas, he said, pungent and oily. He waited for a dorsal fin to slice through the waves, for captains to chatter over the radio, for boat engines to hum together. So far, nothing. Tourists sat in boats nearby, eyes wide, hoping to spot one of the several male orcas named for Aztec gods and emperors. Moctezuma, Cultahac, Tlaloc. Some humans already had their wetsuits on and fins at their feet, preparing to drop into the open water with the ocean's apex predator. Swimming with killer whales is one of the rarest wildlife encounters on Earth, done only in 2 places, La Ventana, Mexico, and Skjorvøy, Norway. In both, visitors don wetsuits, snorkels, and masks to observe the 20-foot-long animals moving through open water. Growing crowds, fueled by social media and a generation that first encountered orcas in captivity or on screen, are descending on 2 otherwise quiet coastal towns, bringing money and friction in equal measure. Researchers still cannot say what sustained human contact does to wild orcas. In neither country has that slowed the industry. Everyone will tell you there's never been an orca attack on humans in the wild, said Jorg Severa Hauser, a Mexican underwater photographer who has led tours in Mexico and Norway. But they're highly intelligent animals. With constant pressure, an accident is bound to happen sooner or later. Shortly before noon, Mr. Rios' radio crackled. The killer whales were south, close to Baja de los Muertos. Mr. Rios grabbed the wheel, throttling the Suzuki engine to life. The boat tore through the water. 10 or so dorsal fins broke the surface ahead, black against the sandy beige desert landscape of Baja California Sur. Mr. Rios was among the first to reach the animals, but not by much. Within minutes of the radio call, white wakes were cutting through the waves. He watched boats come, counting them. "This thing is like poison," he said, pointing to the radio. A killer whale passed beneath the bow, shimmering in the sunlight shallows, its slick body breaking the blue. Boats jostled for position, some cutting through the orca's path. Someone on a neighboring boat dropped, fins first, into the water before the vessel had fully stopped. But the orcas sped past. Then a drone, supposedly prohibited during the activity, buzzed overhead. The orcas were still visible, dark shapes moving away from the noise. Mr. Rios tensed. For years he had seen boats swarm killer whales, chasing them, harassing them, cutting them off. And now this. He pulled alongside the neighboring boat and caught the other captain's eye. Hey, he said, frustrated but calm, pointing upward. We've got to do things right. We've got to do things better. January in Skierniewice. Although orcas are commonly associated with cold seas, in Mexico they find a gulf teeming with rich marine life. They hunt mobula rays, whales, dolphins, sharks, bone fishes in the waters of the Sea of Cortez. Last year, in an attempt to regulate the tourism attracted by the opportunity to swim with these animals, Mexico, where marine safaris long operated in a legal gray zone, introduced a permitting system for tour operators. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Norway, where the practice has been running for several decades, has no comparable rules. Orcas follow vast herring migrations into the Arctic fjords each winter, arriving between November and January. The animals behave differently, hunt differently, and present different challenges to the humans trying to regulate the industry. On a morning in January, with the sun barely clearing the snow-capped mountains, Yves Jourdain, 38, led a boat through the choppy, dark waters off Skierniewice, a working fishing town and a small natural harbor. Tourists huddled on a rigid inflatable in sub-zero temperatures, faces buried under wool layers. Dr. Jourdain, a marine biologist and director of the Norwegian Orca Survey, was equally bundled. Only her eyes and her nose were visible above her neon gear. She regularly captains whale watching tours, but never enters the water herself. Dozens of other boats were already on the water, full of tourists determined to see the killer whales. Every morning during the season, buses from Tromsø unloaded tourists from across the globe onto the harbor dock. By the time the sky turned briefly pale with light, the fjords were already crowded with inflatables carrying tourists who had paid hundreds of dollars to see or snorkel with killer whales. This is my dream since I've been a child, said Yakir Asaraf, a nature photographer who had traveled to Skierniewice to swim with orcas. Christina Balote, a photographer and whale watching guide who has worked in the industry for more than 10 years, recalled a time when she and her partner led tours to snorkel with the orcas. We intentionally decided to stop because it became too much, she said. Even now, some situations upset them so much that she asks her partner, who works as a skipper, to move away from the orcas and the snorkelers. On busy days, small groups of orcas can be surrounded by more than 20 boats at once. Whales also aggregate tightly around large herring fishing vessels. Whale watching and snorkel boats seek out the same spots. Before a distance rule existed, snorkelers were too close to fishing vessels, triggering a regulation around active fishing boats, but not around the animals. Ms. Balate has boarded herring fishing vessels many times to learn about the fishing operation and animal behavior. The Arctic winter limits the hours of operation, but there is no cap on boats, creating intense, unregulated traffic around the whales. A lack of regulations has made the activity unsafe for both humans and animals, Ms. Balate said. Large whales are not playmates for humans, she said. Just the sheer size difference can create dangerous situations. Until someone dies here, they will do nothing, she added. It's going to get worse. Encounters with marine animals, whale watching, cage diving with white sharks, swimming with manta rays, have become a multi-billion-dollar industry around the world. But researchers are finding that some activities may be disruptive to the animals. A 2021 study in Colombia found that the sound of a single whale-watching boat could mask up to 63% of a humpback song. In Washington, females of an endangered population of killer whales were more likely to abandon foraging when vessels were nearby, which could affect the animal's ability to reproduce, researchers noted. Boats or snorkelers might interrupt feeding or make hunting less efficient, pushing the animals to travel faster or change direction more often. In orca populations, tourists may also reduce opportunities for the animals to rest and socialize. Some countries have responded with strict protections. New Zealand prohibits swimming within 300 feet of killer whales. In British Columbia, people who approached too closely can be fined thousands of dollars. Since 2013, Dr. Jourdain has tracked individual orcas in Norway, including their life histories and overall health. In recent years, her focus has shifted to how whale watching and snorkeling may be stressing the animals. Her team is the first to measure cortisol levels in blubber samples from Norwegian killer whales, comparing results from active tourist seasons against years with no tourism, such as during the pandemic. Last November, Dr. Jourdain had a biopsy, a biopsy gun in her hand to target a killer whale for a blubber sample when snorkelers swam toward her. It's absolutely ridiculous, she said. Elena Sasso, a master's student at Sapienza University of Rome, who spent a season working as a snorkeling guide, analyzed drone footage to study how orcas responded to approaching boats and swimmers. Martin Brill, co-founder of Whale to Sea, spent 7 years proposing guidelines for whale activities. He wanted to ensure responsible whale safari operations that considered safety for both humans and animals. To him, two things were crucial: whale watching licenses and regulating the number of boats. It's very simple, he said. Too much is not good. Dr. Jourdain is skeptical. I think it's going to get worse, she said in January, adding that she doubted that her research would be of much help. I don't have faith that it will change anything. Marianne Sivertsen Nice, Norway's Minister of Fisheries and Ocean Policy, said that she was aware of the need for clearer regulations and planned to strengthen whale watching rules, such as establishing distance requirements for vessels and snorkelers in time for the next season. Sadie Hale, an anthropologist at the University of Bergen, noted in a 2025 study that the situation was commonly described as a Wild West. She has found that many visitors in Norway see the encounter as a form of apology for the way humans have mistreated orcas, particularly in captivity. They are seeking an experience that doesn't look like captivity, she said. But for some of them, it isn't the peaceful, harassment free encounter they'd hoped for. Ship of Fools? With the sun high in the Mexican sky, the day stretching into late afternoon, Mr. Rios took over the radio. He assigned turns, called down drones, and made sure each boat got its time with the animals before moving on. For several hours, he coordinated the traffic, 8 boats more or less, until everyone had their pass at the pod. We're all going to leave, he said finally, his voice firm over the radio. No double shifts. Voices mumbled their agreement. No one wants to be in charge, he said afterwards. This year, he had not wanted anything to do with orcas. I didn't want to be one of the ones who messed things up, he said. In both Norway and Mexico, the influx of orca-seeking tourists has transformed local economics. In La Ventana, some families are trading grueling, low-profit trades like night fishing for marine tourism. A tourist spot to swim with orcas starts at $100 in Mexico and reaches $400 in Norway. Some scientists argue that the activity should have stayed as whale watching and not swimming, said Georgina Sade, a marine biologist with Orcas Pacifico Mexicano, an initiative that is leading the regulatory efforts. But the community wanted this activity, she added, so the only path forward was to regulate it. The plan put forward was detailed. No drones, no spotter planes, limits on boat numbers and swimmers in the water at once, distance and speed restrictions near the animals. When the height of orca season returns in May and June, Mr. Rios estimates that around 100 boats will be on the water. Not all of them might have permits. Jorg Urban, a whale researcher at the Autonomous University of Baja California Sur, has a broader concern. Killer whales are dolphins and not legally protected like true whales. Regulations might mask the tourists who swim with protected marine mammals, he said, such as sperm whales, blue whales, and humpbacks. Even so, Dr. Urban said he would rather have some rules than none. The more pressing problem, he said, was how little anyone knew about Mexico's killer whales to begin with. What do they do, he said. What areas do they use? This is basic information. Mexico's Ministry of Environment in Baja California Sur did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Mario Pardo, a marine biologist at the Center for Scientific Research and Higher Education in Ensenada, who led courses on orca behavior for permit holders, said of the local captains, "Some think the orcas will always be there." The next morning, Mr. Rios went out again. So did dozens of other boats whose captains had gotten word or seen videos of the killer whales in La Ventana. The bay was full of life. Dolphins leaped nearby. Blue whales surfaced, massive and gentle. A sea lion turned circles in the lapping waves. Tourists watched and waited, eyes fixed on the horizon, determined to see the black dorsal fin that would make the trip complete. "We have all these animals," Mr. Rios said, as a blue whale broke the surface beside the boat, "and yet we are fools." You have been reading You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 5th issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Barbara. Thank you for listening.